How are we doing today, guys? The reason I started this channel was because, well, I've been studying heavily since 2011, 2012, trying my best to soak up as much info on the times that we're in, the biblical perspective on what the world is like right before it hits the tribulation, and just where we sit in the timeline. And after having become convinced that things are a lot closer than one would originally have assumed, a lot of things change once you realize that there's just a certain amount of unavoidability that comes along with God's plan. The notion that humans can vote their way out of anything, when God is standing in the background saying things like Habakkuk 2:13, check this out. Has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire, that the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? We have it in our head, much like the Nicolaitans in the New Testament, that somehow the voice of the people could ultimately end up being the voice of God, as if our collective voice could ever reach to the heavens like his and have the same amount of power. Really, if we're being completely honest and we take politics on the face for what it is essentially an idolatrous assuming of equality, almost, if not plainly so, on its face with God. Is it not? Isn't that not what Nimrod tried to do when he talked all the people to getting together, creating the giant ziggurat, building it up to the heavens so as to be like God? Is that not what occurs every single time a government decides to go rogue and officially starts to oppress its people, become ungodly, and demand fealty over God? This happens repeatedly, and it's a constant throughout history. It's actually one of the few constants that we see occur in just about every major civilization that has ever come to exist on Earth. In our particular situation, because voting everywhere, it occurs in every major, Western country, let's be clear, but we're the only ones who have allowed ourselves in this position to be talked into only having two options. And then every 4 years to be essentially forced, not that everybody acquiesces, but we're essentially forced to go through this. It's almost like a clown gauntlet, let's be honest. They bring in, one side that is clearly overtly satanic, and then they bring one in that claims not to be, but yet has nothing in its track record to prove that it isn't almost exactly the same, let's be honest. One is overt, one is subversive, and really holds the brakes on the other, but they're really just two sides of the exact same coin. We're now in a position where we've been, let's be clear, financially strangled, and have a lot of our American Constitution been subverted for the last 4 years. It really has. The pandemic, all the nonsense surrounding all of that, all of this has been fear-mongering with the absolute goal of getting people to be as politically minded as possible and as faith-minded or religiously minded as little as possible, because the idea is we're supposed to think by seeing what we're seeing that there's an answer here in real time that doesn't involve God. Or it does involve God, but we're merely just seeing him as one of the background players that's supporting a side over the other, as if he isn't fully aware that both sides are completely contrived and controlled by Satan. This is an amazing thing. Many people out there will tell you you're not doing your civic duty if you don't vote. What happens if we're Christian and we read verses like Daniel 11:36, and we come to realize that there is literally nothing stopping the timing, the revelation, the activities, and ultimately the utter subjugation of the world by Antichrist? Nothing stops that. It has a perfect timeline. It is set. It's like it's ticking down, and there's nothing that's going to stop it. Trump, Kamala, doesn't matter. And in fact, let's be completely honest and straightforward here and say, regardless of who gets into office here in not too many weeks or months or whatever, it's not going to matter. It doesn't matter if it's Kamala. It doesn't matter if it's Trump. Antichrist still rises. Here's Daniel 11:36. The king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and say unheard of things against the God of gods, the true God. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place. It is a constant theme in the Bible, and if you've been any kind of reader for any kind of time of the Bible, even if just surface level and you haven't really gotten into it, it's quite clear that the Lord superintends each nation according to the leadership it deserves. Right now, the United States, I believe, and I'm probably correct in this, but again, the numbers will bear out in eternity. I'm sure the Lord will let me know if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure that the United States still holds the remnant, the most amount of true Christians left on earth. That means, if only for a short time, we are still, believe it or not, technically under his relative protection. Now, that being said, when we read, Revelation 3:14 through 22, and we see just how bad this final generation really is, we can essentially see that although we are still saved and we're still his, we're being put in a position to turn back to him and reinvigorate that initial zeal we had when we first found him, and let that run our CPU, if you will, than all of this worldly nonsense, right? That's not actually the case. Unfortunately, our particular generation has become so worldly that it's almost undistinguishable from the world around us. So the truth is, if we're being honest and we're making an honest self-assessment, we get what we deserve. It really doesn't matter who wins. Let's be completely honest. We've got one person who the majority of conservatives and Christians in this nation unfortunately have come to idolize. He's an idol, let's be completely honest. The other side, overtly evil, overtly antichrist. It's quite clear to see that we're not supposed to choose that one. If we were all just kind of blind and stupid and forced into this, it would be quite obvious that the Christian would choose the side that is not overtly killing babies and doing all the other stupid evil things it's doing, like trying to let our nation be overrun by foreigners that we can't control. All of these things are biblical. In fact, I think it's 3 or 4 different times, but the notion in the Old Testament is when you hear foreign languages being spoken in your own land, you should know the judgment is either on its way or already here because of the ungodly behavior of the bulk majority of the people at hand. So we're getting very much our comeuppance as we speak. If we think that we can somehow vote our way out of God's wrath or forgive me, this isn't God's wrath. This is God's punishment. This is God's punishment to believers. This is God's wrath to unbelievers via Romans 1. Let's read Psalm 2 real quick, and you can understand just exactly how stupid all of this really is. It's stupid and pointless. And don't let me convince you in thinking that having a point of view on these things is incorrect. However, that being said, to take on a political point of view is to take on a perspective that Satan has essentially pre-drawn out for you and highlighted many bullets that seem to be Christian and biblical in their origin, but unfortunately he sprinkled in a bunch of satanic, power in numbers. We can do this. Let's vote together. Don't worry about Jesus. Focus on that human being instead. This is what the Lord thinks of this. Psalm 2, and we'll finish. Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers gather together against the Lord and his anointed one. Let us break off their chains, they say, and throw off their fetters. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. Then he rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have instilled my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will proclaim the decree of the Lord. He said to me, You are my son. Today I have become your father. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will rule them with an iron scepter. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise. Be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you be destroyed in your way. For his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. What's going to stop that? What holds off the 1,000-year reign of Christ? What tells God he's got to put a pause on his 7,000 years of man? It's not politics. It's not the collective voice of Christians begging him not to do what he's promised to do. It is certainly not the satanic masses thinking that God doesn't exist and we can just delegate him out of existence and somehow force the earth to worship Satan. That's exactly what we're dealing with here. Let's take this next month, people, to breathe and focus on our families. Focus on doing the right thing, growing in the Word, listening to more Bible studies, perhaps forcing yourself to watch those videos about those verses that you really don't like. This channel is over 420-something videos long, something like that. There is a lot here that most of you have either not studied or have not studied in depth enough. It would be a great replacement for anything political or any news article or station or streaming service that you may have as far as the information therein. It will be infinitely more useful to you. Anyhow, I hope you guys are doing well. I wanted to make this because, I'm not bulletproof. I am tempted to want to think these ways, but I have to slap myself back into reality and understand that God is utterly sovereign. There is nothing we can do to wrest that power out of his hands. And if we think that politics in any way is serving God, we need to take a step back and, again, self-assess and be honest, because on some level, unfortunately, if we've gotten to that place, we have started to replace faith with politics, and that is exactly what Satan wants. Let me know what you guys think. I'm really hoping you guys are staying strong. I'm hoping this stuff isn't getting to you, and you're able to know that peace of understanding that God has this all 1,000% within his control, and there's nothing that is stopping him. And you're on his team. Amen.